Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we do have Dr. Khodr with us. Doctor, are you with us? Can you hear me? Dr. Khodr, are you with us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you
okay,
hear
very good. Now I can hear you.
Great.
Doctor, thanks for joining us. Dr. Khodr, I mean, you've been following the news about the Gaza deal. Tell me your thoughts about what's going on.
Well, I want to reiterate first that, number one, Israel did leave the Gaza Strip unilaterally as Sharon wanted, and that was a very strategic move so that they can keep most of the West Bank just to gain international support. But what they did is that they just surrounded it to make it into a very large prison. They left the inside, and then they just surrounded the borders and the sea, and so there was no movement in and out. And for the last 5 months, they have besieged Gaza, where 1.5 million Palestinians, not allowing food, not allowing medicines in, and got the international community to cut off all aid to the Palestinians, basically collectively punishing them totally. So for the last 5 months, the Palestinians have been suffering. At the same time, Hamas has been observing a 16-month truce. And what has happened, and I want to reiterate what you said, Haaretz today, which is a major Israeli paper, actually said today that this has been planned for weeks to invade Gaza, and I think the main purpose of that has nothing to do with the soldier, because whether the soldier lives or dies is not going to change the policy of Israel, but they wanted to enter to topple Hamas, and that's why they've arrested over 1/3 of the government, 20 parliamentarians. That has never been heard of, that a country goes into an occupied territory still and just hijacks the whole government and trying to topple it because they don't want Hamas that was democratically elected, just like the United States wanted. So I think it's very, very tragic, and it reminds me that for one soldier, they're punishing 1 million Palestinians. Reminds me of a quote of one of their famous rabbis that was quoted in the New York Times a while back, where he said, 1 million Arabs are not worth a Jewish fingernail. And so I think that has been the strategic policy of Israel, not just from now, but since its founding. They don't want Palestinians on what they call Israeli land, their holy land. And so anytime they want to kill them, they want to ethnically kill them, move them out, suffocate them, starve them, they're going to do it. And as you said, the world is silent, including the Arab and Muslim world, unfortunately.
Now, I mean, tell me, I'm trying to understand, how could Israel get away with so much? Now, you know, the Palestinians, they went ahead and did this and captured this Israeli, but even the Arab media is calling him a kidnapped soldier. I'm trying to understand that. You know, you kidnap someone when you go to his house, just like the Israelis do. They kidnap Palestinians every day. They just kidnapped 8 Palestinian ministers and 21 members of parliament. You know, how could she get away with that? And when the Palestinians capture, in the middle of a fight, a soldier, then this is kidnapped, but the others are arrested. Tell me, make me understand this world, Dr. Mohammed.
Well, I think that I want to quote for you what the Israeli foreign minister herself said. She said that any military action committed by the Palestinians in the occupied territories is not considered terrorism. And that's internationally recognized, that they have legitimate right to resist. Now, this is not an issue of kidnapping. You have 2 warring parties, the resistance, which are the Palestinians, against the occupying military. Taking prisoners from either side is called a prisoner of war. There is no such thing as kidnapping a soldier, as one of your callers called. This individual is a prisoner of war because the Palestinians are resisting the military onslaught of one of the most powerful militaries in the world. The fact that they're being called kidnapped, they are truly parroting exactly what Israel wants as talking points. If you read the book of Tom Friedman, From Beirut to Jerusalem, you will find out that everything, almost all reporters who are in Israel or outside of Israel, get talking points immediately from a very, very organized public relations. And they just, because of a lack of knowledge, intellectual laziness, fear, intimidation, they use those talking points. And so the word kidnapping was the word coined by Israel, distributed to the media, and they just totally adopted blindly. I mean, without any thought or historical context or any analysis whatsoever, including our media, because, you know, we don't have many reporters in the Palestinian territories, Arab reporters. And the people don't know that all the media that comes out of Israel is censored by the military. So they decide what comes in and what comes out, whether it's ABC or the Arab News in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Recently, as you know, Dr. Mohammed, Current Issues was broadcasting on Bridges TV, and it has been broadcasting for since December of last year. And then all of a sudden, about 3 weeks ago, they ceased broadcasting the program. And mainly, the reason is, or was, the Jewish cable operators. Now, I mean, can they do that? Isn't there a law? I mean, don't people have the right to be heard? What happened to our free speech?
Well, free speech is in the eye of the beholder, very much like the undefined words such as terrorism and civilization. I am, you know, trying to be diplomatic here and Islamic. I am extremely, extremely saddened and disappointed that the sole Muslim TV station that we have that has progressed rapidly with support from people like myself, I was among their first supporters, not only financially, but to get a lot of people to support it. We had such high hopes that finally our voice, the Arab Muslim voice, and especially the plight of the occupied Arabs and Muslims, and especially the Palestinians, would finally have an avenue, an outlet where people can understand the truth that has been so suppressed for decades in this country. And it's just so tragic that they succumb, just like all the other media in this country and in Western Europe, to Israel influence, to the Jewish lobby, to the Israeli lobby that totally intimidated them, and they just caved in quite quickly, which is unbelievable, because that was the only place that you and would have a voice to explain what the situation in Palestine is. And it reminds me of this ongoing quote about the media that says, "He who controls the news controls the views." And therefore, suppressing anything against Israel is a strategy, a deliberate strategy by Israel and its lobby here, that no negative at all, any negative news should come out of Israel. And it's just like that old song that many Americans will understand, that the media accentuates the positive and eliminates the negative about Israel. And therefore, we do not have at all a balanced view of what's going on in the Middle East. And many Americans understand that and understand that they're getting a one-sided viewpoint. But I would urge everyone who is listening to your show, Muslim or otherwise, to contact Bridges TV and ask them to put back this important program. That is the only outlet for Palestinians who are dying day and night without anyone caring or noticing.
We appreciate that, and hopefully someone out there will listen. And actually, we might still have a chance if enough people call and write to Bridges TV. And if anyone wants to write to them, it's info@bridgestv.com, and tell them to put Current Issues back on their lineup. Now, Dr. Mohammed, you are a medical doctor and was present in Beirut during the 1982 war and siege of Beirut. Tell me briefly about that experience. I'm sure it was a profound experience for you.
It was. It's still unforgettable. I cannot forget that experience. It has, been implanted in my brain with many, many visions of, strewn bodies and bombed bodies and shrapnels. And that is why I feel personally what the Palestinians are undergoing in Gaza today with the cutoff of electricity, which, by the way, that power plant is insured by the U.S. government, so we're going to pay for it anyway. For 3 months, from June to September, I was training at the American University Hospital, and the whole city was darkened, no electricity. The whole city was deprived of water. There was shelling from the air, the sea, and by land. There was total indiscriminate destruction with illegal weapons such as cluster bombs, with basically just shred children because they look like toys, with phosphorus bombs, napalm bombs. And they would destroy a whole building, a skyscraper, just for the thought that there might be a Palestinian official there. So for 3 months, 20,000 people were massacred by Israel, by Sharon. On top of that, as you recall, in 1982 in September, Israel allowed the Lebanese phalangists to enter the Sabra and Shatila camp and for 3 days massacre over 2,000 men, women, and children while Israel was shining the lights for them and laughing, as Tom Friedman records in his book, as to what the massacre of Palestinians are. And every time I remember that, I remember one incident that sticks in my mind. And when they say, why do they hate us? Muslims have been asking that for centuries. Why does the West hate us from the time of the Crusades? But there was one incident where I was in the emergency room and 7 small bodies were brought in that were shredded. And they were all siblings ranging from 2 to 14 years of age. And I walked into the back of the emergency room, and they were all just wrapped up, and they were in pieces. And I was just stunned, stunned. And they were all playing in the balcony of their home, and an Israeli rocket just shredded them. And I suddenly, as in a little while, I hear this man screaming and crying, "Where are my children?" And he comes in, and I recognized right away that he's the father, and he begged me to let him see his children, which I didn't want him to see, but he begged me, so I showed it to him. And he knelt down and cried over these children and held his youngest daughter to me, and he said, "Why do they hate us? Why do Americans let the Israelis bomb us? Where is the United Nations? Where is the world? What am I going to tell their mother?" And I will never forget that. And that will never be on television. It will never be recorded on any American magazine or newspaper. That's what Americans need to understand. Whether we like it or not, we are complicit with our taxes and our silence that allows an illegal occupation of an entire population by a nation that did not own this land but was given to it. It's like Arthur Kessler, who was a famous historian, said, one nation promising another nation the land of a third nation. And that's England to the Jews on Palestine. So I think that your program is so vital to give this truth, to give this honest picture. And all we want, you and I and everyone who loves peace and justice, all we want is a peaceful solution, 2 states, where the Palestinians live in freedom, in dignity, in economic development, where they can live as human beings and not like as the Israeli prime ministers have called them, cockroaches and cancers and beasts and the devils. They need their freedom, and Americans understand that. We know what freedom is, and we ought to help them get their freedom. All they want is just 22% of their land that is left from their 100% of their land.
Okay.
And that is the least we can do as human beings. Regardless of politics, we owe it to them and owe it to everybody who is suppressed, oppressed, and who needs freedom. Just like Bush wanted to spread democracy, let's start with Israel and Palestine.
Okay, very good. Doctor, we're going to go to the phones and get some callers. Go ahead, Ramsey. Ramsey, go ahead. You're on. Turn down your computer, Ramsey. All right. Ramsey probably forgot us, and he's watching his computer. And when you do that, we can't really wait too long on the line. So call back, Ramsey. Dr. Mohamed, now you and 2 other doctors at an East Coast university, a prestigious university, you started like an educational program to basically, at a university, to basically tell people and educate people about Palestine, but the administration wasn't really too happy with you. Tell me about that episode.
Well, this was at a time when I was doing my medical residency at a prestigious, as you said, East Coast University. At the time, almost every week we had all kinds of seminars and conferences and speakers and films about Israel and how great Israel is. So these 2 Palestinian PhD candidates, 2 wonderful young women, and I said, well, let's, in the student lounge, which is, supposedly has the freedom of speech for the students, we thought to just hang up posters of cartoons. That's all we wanted to do. Cartoons that had been published in Europe and the U.S. and Canada about the plight of the Palestinians and their suffering. So we cut them out, put them in a couple of posters, and put them on. And as soon as we put them on, there was a PhD Jewish student who walked by and said, take them down. And, of course, we said no. So he went and got another Jewish professor, who was a professor of toxicology, as I remember, and he came out and said, take them down, and we said no. So believe it or not, they went to the administration and got the dean, the associate dean, the dean of students, and they all came out and insisted that we take it down. And we tried to argue with them, First Amendment, free speech, this is what you're teaching us. What about what Israelis are doing? They said, take it down, and we were forced to take it down. And there's the rub. This is the bottom line in this country. The lobby, the intimidation, the label of anti-Semitism, the fear, the media protection, the congressional protection of Israel, all of that works to suppress any opposition, any voice that will say Israel is doing something wrong. And that was one incident. Another incident that happened to me at the same university is I was teaching a course called International Health. And other than lectures in the morning, in the afternoon, I would bring speakers from various countries in the world to talk about the healthcare in their country. And everybody was happy with it, except when I brought a very wonderful young lady. She was a nurse, a Palestinian, who was studying maternal and child health, and she had some slides, and she was showcasing the checkpoints and the lack of healthcare, and the malnutrition, infant mortality, and so forth. And out of the 75 students, there were only 2 Jewish students, 1 male and 1 female. They got up, disrupted the class, banged on their desks, threw cokes around, and they totally disrupted the class, not allowing this young lady to go on. And what was shocking was 2 things. Not only that they were able to do it, but the silence of the 73 other students reminds me of the silence of the majority of the world when Israel commits atrocities or commits suppression or has America pay and die for its strategy. The second thing is they actually went to the dean and complained about me. So I was called into the dean's office asking me, why did I hold this lecture? Rather than saying, how did the students behave? Why did I hold this lecture? And this is repeated across this country, from campuses to companies to corporations to the media to the government. No one dares lift their voice, and if you do, you will be smacked with anti-Semitism, which actually has nothing to do with Judaism or any other ethnic group. It simply refers to languages. You and I are Semites. Most of the Jews are not.
Of course.
So there is a tremendous silencing of
the only Semites and the Jews are the Arab Jews. That's about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Doctor, we're going to go back to the phones with Amigo. Go ahead, Amigo.
Hey, thank you, Doc. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
All right. You started your show off with a bang. Listen, I'm a veteran. Listen to your show all the time, and I admire your show. Listen, that idiot Larry is 2 things about him. Either he's not a veteran, he's never been to a military institution or war like myself, or he watches Fox News a lot. So forgive him for his ignorance. Okay. Dr. Mohamed, how you doing?
I'm fine, sir.
Okay,
thank you for calling in.
I want to make a statement, and I'm going to get off so I can hear you respond, and a question. My statement is this. You know about Putin want to send his troops, I'm talking about President Putin of Russia, want to send his troops because of the beheading of his 4 soldiers over there and what have you. Blah, 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 Okay, it's my conceivable conception, that's my opinion now, that the Israeli had something to do with that, so they could ignite Putin to send troops in there, another ploy to get mad with the I'm talking about the Iraqi war now.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Just to fuel it more, and I think the Israeli had something to do with that. That's my feeling. And last but not least, Doctor, respond on this. Why is it, for the love of God Almighty that created all men, why other countries cannot see through what Israel is doing to the Palestinians? Why will not one country in this world come forth and say, enough is enough?
Very good. Thank you. Doctor, why we don't see many countries standing up and saying enough is enough, Israel?
Well, I think that if you look at even the United States, there have been over 80 United Security Council resolutions condemning Israel for many of its acts. Unfortunately, they just gather dust on the shelf. Unlike a UN resolution, for example, that the U.S. wants against Syria or against Iran or against Iraq, that's immediately implemented. Additionally, every year in the General Assembly, with the exception of Israel and the United States and maybe small islands, a couple of small islands, the world demands Palestinian freedom and self-determination. The problem with, and even here, there's a large majority of Americans who want that, but they would come up to me, for example, when we talk and say in silence, we support the Palestinians. And the majority of Israelis want peace and justice for the Palestinians. The problem is this: as long as the U.S. government is held hostage to Israel, and it began with President Truman, who needed the Jewish vote and support and money to win New York when he was trailing badly behind Thomas Dewey, the Republican, till Bush Jr. now. Every U.S. government has protected Israel from any international, and I mean any international action, including the simple investigation of atrocities against Palestinians, such as happened in Jenin. So as long as the U.S. government, the most powerful nation, will not allow anyone to dictate to Israel anything else, and as long as the American people don't demand of their government to change its policy, this will continue.
Okay. Very good. Let's go to 2 with Ramsey. Go ahead, Ramsey from Canada. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, sir.
Yes, hi.
Yes, sir. I totally agree with you that, and you were right when you and I were talking against Ray Hanania that something was going to happen to Bridges TV. And so what happened was like nothing new. Like a lot of Americans who have a different point of view got screwed. And you mentioned a few weeks ago that you were on the ADL list. So I'm sure the ADL heard about you can be on Bridges TV and all that. And so another thing you have to keep in mind. Hamas have a right to defend themselves. This is the law in the United Nations article, the right of self-defense. And so another thing you have to keep in mind, and the viewers have to keep in mind, that Israel has 9,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons, and all those were kidnapped without trial, and they got tortured. And we never hear about that in the media.
Okay. You have a question, Ramsey?
No, sorry. Like I just wanted to make comment, sir.
Okay.
And so, like, you can see that how the Jewish influence in the media is just getting stronger, and that has to be exposed. And
okay. Well, in the second hour, we're going to have Reverend Ted Pike, and we are going to go more in depth on who the media really is, and that's coming up in the second hour. Thank you, Ramsey.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to Brad on 3. Go ahead, Brad.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
First off, I want to say I'm sorry about Bridges TV doing that to you. Too bad, because
you never know. There's always an opportunity waiting out there in every problem, so I'm waiting for the opportunity.
Okay, well, you do it. We're all stand by it. Listen, I have the feeling that it sounds to me like the main reason why nobody does anything about anything, I just think they're all paid off. I really do. I think that the Arab leaders as well, no offense, but I think they're paid off.
Look, you can offend as much as you want, believe me.
Oh, okay. No, because it sounds like look at this Bridges. From what I understand, it's an Islamic people that own Bridges TV, and yet.
You know, Brad, the thing that's really, I guess it is shocking me, because I was almost expecting a better response from the Muslim and Arab organizations. I received hundreds of emails from organizations, non-Arab, non-Muslim organizations, that supported me against, what Bridges did. Very few organizations, and I appreciate the brilliancy of Dr. Mohammed. He wrote an excellent article. Actually, that's how I got to know him, because he wrote an excellent article. And anyone can Google or search Dr. Mohamed Khodr's name, and you will see the articles, the hundreds of articles that he wrote. One of them was about Bridges TV. But I'm shocked, Brad, of why the Muslim organizations, the Arab organizations, they did not, this is a classic example of what we were talking about all these years, about the influence of the Israelis, the Zionists, the Jewish influence on the media. And I guess they don't want to stick their neck out. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. I would like to say that you're right, but you came from Palestine, obviously, but you got more of the American spirit than half the country. I mean, they don't want free speech. Your shows are interesting. You don't just cover Muslim stuff and things against Jewish stuff. You discuss, from what I understand, you do the truth, and I find it fascinating. I think you have an audience that would really enjoy this, because it's unique. We don't get it from the stupid mainstream medium, or media. Excuse me. But it seems like where do you go from here? What are we going to do when you can't? If they'll even block you, if the own Muslims are blocking you, we don't have a chance.
Well, the shocking me because they did not have the guts to stand up. You know, they didn't want to lose a market, but you know what? If they would have kept it on and stood up, I think they would have had a lot more support than they did by just caving in. Dr. Mohammed, any comments on that?
Well, I think
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask your question.
Okay,
No, go ahead. I'll listen.
If, say, Hamas becomes legitimized through the world, do you think that they too would probably be offered something to betray the Palestinians? You know what I mean? Do you think that Israel or somebody would come up and say, "Hey, look, you know, we'll give you a Swiss bank account full of millions"? I predict that in the future. Do you think that'll happen, where they too will be bought off, or no?
Okay, Dr. Mohammed.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
His question was, do you think Hamas, if the Israelis come to them and say, "Hey, look, we're going to give you millions of dollars and Swiss bank accounts," you think they will stop the fight?
No, I don't think so. I think anyone who has lived under occupation and has suffered as long as the Palestinians have, you cannot buy their freedom. You cannot bribe them to stop their internationally recognized right of resistance to freedom. They will not accept any amount of money. If money was an issue, why don't the Arabs and Muslims, with all their wealth, just buy off all the settlers and buy off Israel and tell Israel go to live in Europe, where they're the ones who committed the Holocaust? No, I don't think any money will make a difference to any Palestinian. They are very proud people, as all people who are, proud of their religion and of their land that they've lived in there for thousands and thousands of years.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brad. Thank you. We're going to be taking a break, and we will be right back. So they're making these products cheaper in other countries. They ship them over here, but we still pay more. Speak up, please, Jake.
I was calling to see. I was one of the hostages.
We are borrowing $4 billion a day to run this country. He had very much the same message as George Bush, so people voted.
The American administration, the people that we elected, they really don't work for the United States of America. They work for Israel.
Take truth out of democracy, you take democracy out of the country.
That democracy is not an alien idea in the Islamic world, and that is, again, a misconception.
100% that support our troops by bringing them back. Today, raising taxes 60%, we will break through. If we don't do something.
Who owns the insurance company?
Exactly. You know, Ray, I'm not anti-Semitic either, because if I was, I wouldn't be anti-Semitic.
It's absolutely, that's totally a misconception. There's no debate.
The problem is, what do you do after you bomb? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are speaking with Dr. Mohamed Khodr. Dr. Mohamed, now this brings us really into discussing something that we had discussed here previously, the Israel lobby. And because everything we are talking about, I mean, it would answer every question if we get to know what this Israel lobby is all about. Then everything will become clear of why Israel is able to shut down and shut off everyone that is against it, including Americans. And before you answer, I just want to tell our viewers that back in 1972, there was a conversation between Billy Graham and Richard Nixon, Reverend Billy Graham, and this is what Billy Graham said. Now, this was taken off of the tapes, the Nixon tapes. Billy Graham is saying this stranglehold has got to be broken, or the country is going down the drain. Richard Nixon says, "You believe that?" Then Billy Graham says, "Yes, sir." Richard Nixon, "Oh boy, so do I. I can't ever say that, but I believe it." And then Billy Graham comes back to, "No, but if you get elected a second time, then we might be able to do something." So this is a conversation between Billy Graham and Nixon talking about the Jews. Nixon got elected, but you know what happens when he got elected for the Watergate, something that every president has done, every party has done, and this current president has even done worse than what Nixon has done. Does this explain how strong this lobby is? Tell me.
Well, we need to sort of separate, sort of give better definitions of what we mean by the lobby. The lobby in the United States that support Israel are two kinds of lobbies. One is the Jewish Zionists, and the more important, more powerful in terms of numbers is actually the Christian Zionists. And they're the ones who are the Christian fundamentalists, who are about 70 million, who want to support Israel to kill it by hastening the arrival of Christ and bringing on the Armageddon or apocalypse. But the Jewish lobby, or the Israeli lobby here, is actually a minority of the Jewish people. The far majority of American Jews are not members of this lobby, and actually many of them oppose it. But the main lobbies are located in Washington, D.C. They stranglehold. You can look at it sort of like a beltway around the Congress and the White House. Its main organization is AIPAC, which is being investigated by the FBI for receiving classified information again and again from the U.S. government. And there's the Anti-Defamation League, there's the Jewish Defense League, there's the Zionist Organization of America, and the other one, the larger one, is the Conference of Presidents of Major American Organizations. These people are so well organized. They have a lot of money, they're very organized, and they have a lot of friends in the media. So it's the money and the media that is their weapon. As I think you've mentioned before, you either give money to the candidate you want, or you give it to the opponent. And almost every congressman and senator, almost all of them, has been attested to by many books and previous senators and so forth, says that this lobby has a stranglehold on U.S. foreign policy. And if anyone strays, it's not just the money, but because the media is either influenced, controlled, owned, or supportive of Israel, the headlines, the editorials will smash any individual who criticizes Israel to shut them up, as it happened recently with Senator Hollings, with Representative Moran from Virginia, and on and on. So that is basically their power. And additionally, they have a sort of a two-way street between government and the lobby. They go into the government and they come out, and therefore you find people such as Richard Pearl, such as Paul Wolfowitz, Martin Indyk. They get into very important national security positions, and then they come back out and lobby the government. So they're very well organized. But they are a small number, a very small number. It's the Arabs and Muslims and Americans who believe in peace and justice, and including many American Jews. We can easily overcome them because we vote. We vote. The only thing we should tell the Congress is cut off aid to Israel. It's the richest country in the world. It's like taxes. Our taxes are being given to Bill Gates. And that will be the first step that will break that stranglehold of the Zionist organizations that lobby our government and actually hijack it to disallow any information that goes in that might impact Israel, and only information that is pro-Israel goes in. And I've been to the Senate and the House of Representatives many times, and I can tell you a lot of their aides, congressional aides, are very pro-Israel, and almost on a daily basis they get constant taxes of talking points, and nobody else. I've met senators who tell me, why aren't you lobbying? Why aren't your people? Why aren't others? We don't hear anybody but them. So that's the reason.
Okay. Now, a lot of people, they make comments as, why don't you have the Arab world help? Why don't you have the Muslim world help? Tell me about this myth that we have a Muslim world and we have an Arab world. Tell me about those two worlds.
Well, actually, the Muslim world comprises currently 1 billion, about a fourth of the Arab world comprises only about 18%, 18% of the total Muslim world. And the differentiation is simply the language. Arabs speak Arabic, and that was the language of the Quran, and so therefore they're called Arabs. Anyone who speaks Arabic is an Arab, while the rest of the Muslims of the world speak other languages. So it's all, in terms of Islam, it's all an Islamic world, but the differentiation is both linguistically and just geographically. But the far majority of Muslims are not Arabs.
Okay, but I mean, tell me why they can't, you have this regime that are so submissive to what the United States wants. Tell me about that phenomena.
Well, I think the phenomena begins even before it gets to the United States. The United States really entered the Middle East after World War II. After Britain and France were defeated in World War II, it became an American region. But the subservience, the submissiveness of Arabs and Muslims, even way before they reach America, is to their dictators. They have an emotional attachment, an attachment of fear, an attachment of intimidation of their own leaders. The leaders control the media, they control the money as if it's their own personal wealth. And so the people do not get the information, they don't get the education, they don't get the health. They have no way and concept of understanding the politics because they're basically trying to survive. And therefore the dictators who are supported by the United States, in order to keep their chair, in order to keep their ruling and keep their wealth, say, hey, America is the power now in the region, and we're going to do what it wants no matter what, because that's what I want to do. The heck with the people. And I'll give you one example. The aid that the Arab world, just the Arab world, gave to the Katrina victims who deserve it, is over $2.6 billion. $2.6 billion. The same countries gave to the victims of the Pakistan earthquake $350 million. So right there you can see their priority.
There you have it. There you have it. Doctor, we're going to squeeze. We only have a couple of minutes left, but we're going to squeeze. I think he hung up. I think we're, yeah, he hung up. Okay, because we're coming to the end of the program. Doctor, go ahead and take a minute and your closing remarks.
Well, I think the media is the defining institution here, and I'll just give you an example. Today's New York Times had an editorial that called Hamas provokes a fight. The White House said it is Hamas's fault and Israel has the right to defend itself. Now here's Israel with the superior army invading and destroying this small Gaza Strip, and yet our government and our media are in collusion to protect Israel and blaming the victims. And this has been the historical context of all the media presentations on the conflict. Blame the victim. And I think Americans are smart enough to realize that that's one-sided. And I pray to God that we all work for justice for both Israelis and Palestinians and for our independence from this Israel lobby.
Okay. Doctor, I just want to thank you for being with us tonight. It has been a pleasure having you. Thank you, sir.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you. And may God give you all the support and guidance to bring truth to the people of America. Thank you, sir, very much. And good night.
Thank you. Good night. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you know, one story that I read in a Palestinian newspaper, and it's a respectable newspaper, but I haven't seen this anywhere else, that Israeli planes were dropping candy on Gaza City, and that candy bars or whatever, I did not get exactly what kind of candy bars it was, but and these people were afraid that this was poisoned, and this was just yesterday. I have not seen that story in anywhere else except this Palestinian newspaper, and you can go and see it on the internet. But they were saying that Israeli planes were dropping candy on the city, and everybody was telling the children, do not eat this candy that you find in the streets. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be back here in 5 minutes with Ted Pike. Be there.